I need medical here. Hey, where's your wife at, buddy? Where's your wife at?
She's dead on the floor in that room.
She looks into the kitchen almost to make sure that her mother has not left the bedroom and gone into the kitchen to make sure where her mom was. So she does not see her mom in the kitchen. She goes into the bedroom. She shoots her mom once, twice. You hear
She's 14 years old. She just killed her mother. And now, she's waiting for her stepdad to come home. A text message appears on his phone. When will you be home, honey? What you're about to see will haunt you. March 19, 2024. A quiet suburban street in Brandon, Mississippi. A man stumbles out of his home, bleeding, screaming into his phone. His name is Heath Smiley. And the girl who just shot him, his 14-year-old stepdaughter, Gregg. My daughter, my stepdaughter, she tried to shoot me. She killed her mom. Oh my God, she killed her mom. Officers rush to the scene. Heath is doubled over on the porch, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his shirt. Where's your wife at, buddy? She's dead. On the floor, in her room. Inside that house. Officers would find the body of Ashley Smiley, a beloved schoolteacher, a devoted mother. She'd been shot 3 times, once in the body, twice more after she fell. The final bullet, less than 3 feet from her face. And the girl who pulled the trigger, she wasn't running, she wasn't hiding, she was sitting calmly in the kitchen, texting. This is the story of Gregg, a straight-A student, a popular, bubbly teenager, and a girl who, on one horrifying afternoon, became a killer. But the question that haunted everyone who knew her wasn't what she did. It was why, because nothing about Gregg made sense. Let's rewind, before the blood, before the screams, before everything fell apart. Let's go back to who Gregg was before March 19th. 14 years old. 8th grade, Carly was the kind of kid teachers loved. Bright, engaged, involved in extracurriculars. She had friends. She had goals. She smiled in every photo. Her mother, Ashley Smiley, taught at the same school Carly attended. Colleagues described her as sweet, kind, the type of person who lit up a room. Ashley and Carly weren't just mother and daughter, they were close. Deeply connected. Carly didn't want to disappoint her mom. Ever. And then there was Heath Smiley, Carly's stepdad. He treated her like his own daughter. They had inside jokes. They went on trips together. Carly had even written him a Father's Day card that read, "Thank you for being the only real dad I've ever had." This was not a broken home. There was no history of abuse. No police reports. No red flags. So what happened? Here's where the story gets darker. Because while Carly looked perfect on the outside, something was unraveling on the inside. It started in the fall of 2023. Heath began noticing changes. Carly wasn't sleeping well. She seemed anxious, on edge. Her memory was slipping. She was cutting herself, hidden marks on her thighs. And she was writing disturbing things in her journal. One entry, dated March 12, 2024, just 7 days before the murder, read, "I think I had a psychotic break earlier. I actually spoke with one of the voices in my head. My particular friend and I were practically screaming. Bloodthirstiest. Thank God there was no physical confrontation. Voices. In her head. Screaming. Carly's parents didn't ignore it. They got her into therapy. In January 2024, she was prescribed Zoloft for anxiety and depression. But it didn't help. Carly told her nurse she felt numb, zombified. So on March 13th, 6 days before the murder, they switched her medication to Lexapro. And that's when things spiraled. Carly became more manic, more irritable, more unstable. Her friends noticed she wasn't herself. She seemed withdrawn, paranoid, dangerous. But here's something most people don't talk about. Carly's biological father, Gregg. He wasn't in Carly's life. Not really. He and Ashley had divorced when Carly was young, and Heath had stepped in to fill that void. But Kevin's absence left more than just an empty chair at the dinner table. It left a legacy. Gregg had a documented history of severe mental illness. He'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He'd been on multiple medications for years, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, the works. And Ashley knew this. In fact, friends and family members testified that Ashley lived with a constant, gnawing fear. What if Carly inherited her father's illness? Every time Carly showed signs of anxiety or depression, Ashley wondered if it was just normal teenage stress, or the beginning of something far worse. When Carly started cutting herself in the fall of 2023, Ashley's worst fears seemed to be coming true. When Carly wrote about hearing voices in her journal, Ashley must have felt like she was watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. But no one thought she was capable of murder. Until the afternoon of March 19th. Here's what we know. Carly and her mom left school together that day. Surveillance footage shows them pulling into the driveway. No argument, no fight. Everything seemed normal. But within 30 minutes, Ashley Smiley would be dead. And Carly, she'd be sitting in the kitchen, texting her stepdad, pretending to be his wife. What happened in those 30 minutes? Let me show you. But first, we need to understand what triggered this. Because earlier that afternoon, before Carly and Ashley left school, something happened. Something that may have been the breaking point. A friend of Carly's had gone to Ashley with concerns. He told her that Carly had been vaping marijuana regularly, that she had a burner phone her parents didn't know about, that she'd been talking to boys behind their backs. Ashley wasn't angry. According to witnesses, she was more disappointed in herself, worried, concerned. But for Carly, that conversation may have been the moment everything changed. Because Carly lived in constant fear of disappointing her mother. Their relationship was so enmeshed, so deeply connected, that the thought of Ashley being upset with her was unbearable. Friends later testified that Carly had issues with being afraid of letting her mom down. That she felt responsible for her mother's emotions. That she would do anything to avoid causing her mom pain. And yet, on March 19th, within minutes of getting home, Carly murdered her. The Gregg Smiley home had security cameras. Multiple angles, and because of that, we can see exactly what Carly did. Here's the timeline. 3 p.m. Carly and Ashley arrive home. They walk into the house. Ashley heads to Carly's bedroom. Carly lets the family dogs out into the backyard. Normal, routine. But then Carly comes back inside, and everything changes. She walks slowly through the house. Quietly, she glances toward her mom's location, making sure Ashley is still in the bedroom. Then Carly walks to the opposite end of the house, to her parents' bedroom, to her mother's side of the bed, and she retrieves a .357 Magnum revolver. She hides it behind her back, walks back across the house, pauses at the kitchen entrance, checking again to make sure her mom hasn't moved. Then she enters the bedroom, and she shoots her mother. Once, Ashley falls. Twice, and then, point blank, less than 3 feet from her mother's face, Carly fires a third time. Ashley Smiley is dead, and here's the part that chills me to my core. Carly doesn't panic. She doesn't scream. She doesn't run. She walks calmly back into the kitchen, sits down at the counter, picks up her mother's phone, and she texts Heath, "When will you be home, honey?" Heath responds, "I'll be a little while longer." Carly sends back a thumbs up emoji. Think about that for a second. Her mother's body is still warm in the next room. Blood is pooling on the bedroom floor. And Carly is sitting at the kitchen counter, calmly texting, pretending to be her mom. Then she calls a friend, FaceTimes them, tells them she really messed up. When the friend asks if they should call 911, Carly says, "No. Don't do that. You can't do that." And then, bizarrely, Carly starts singing. She hums a tune, smiles slightly, returns to her bedroom, where her mother's body is still lying on the floor, and Carly does something that investigators would later describe as disturbing. She poses the body. She places Ashley's hands across her stomach, like someone in a casket. Then she grabs a red towel and drapes it over her mother's face. Why? We don't know, but it gets worse. Because Carly wasn't done, Carly invites a friend over. When the friend arrives at the front door, Carly opens it and asks, "Do dead bodies make you squeamish?" Then she takes her friend inside and shows her mother, dead on the floor, and Carly says something that would haunt this friend forever. "I put 3 in my mom. I've got 3 more waiting for my stepdad." Let's talk about this friend for a moment. Because her testimony would become crucial during the trial, this friend arrived at the Gregg Smiley home not knowing what to expect. Carly had called her, sounding upset, saying she needed help. When she got to the front door, Carly opened it with a strange look on her face. And then she asked that question, "Do dead bodies make you squeamish?" The friend didn't understand at first. She thought Carly was joking, making some kind of morbid reference to a movie or TV show. But then Carly took her inside, down the hallway, into the bedroom, and there was Ashley Smiley, lying on the floor, hands folded across her stomach, a red towel covering her face. The friend froze. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was seeing. And Carly just stood there, calmly, and said, "I put 3 in my mom. I've got 3 more waiting for my stepdad." Then Carly told her friend to hide in the backyard, to stay there until Heath came home, to stay quiet. The friend was terrified. She didn't know what to do. Should she run? Should she call the police? Should she try to talk Carly down? She chose to hide. During her testimony months later, the friend broke down crying. She said she still has nightmares, that she sees Ashley's body every time she closes her eyes, that she'll never forgive herself for not calling 911 sooner. But could she have stopped it? If she'd called the police the moment Carly showed her the body, would Heath Smiley have been spared? We'll never know, because less than an hour after showing her friend Ashley's body, Heath Smiley pulled into the driveway. He had no idea what was waiting for him inside. He walks through the front door, calls out for his wife, and that's when Carly attacks. She's holding the gun, screaming, wild, feral, unrecognizable. Heath later said she had a look on her face he'd never seen before. It wasn't Carly, it was someone or something else. She fires. The bullet strikes Heath in the shoulder, just 6 inches from his head. If it had been slightly to the left, he'd be dead. But Heath is a grown man, and he's not going down without a fight. He lunges forward, wrestles the gun away from her. Carly runs, screaming, out the back door, over the fence, into the neighborhood. Heath is bleeding, disoriented, terrified. He calls 911, and here's what breaks my heart. Even after being shot, Heath doesn't immediately think Carly did this on purpose. He walks through the house with the gun, room by room, thinking there's an intruder. Because the Carly he knew, the girl he raised, wouldn't do this. But then he walks into her bedroom, and he finds Ashley. Oh my God, She shot her mom. She killed her mom. Police arrive within minutes. They find Heath on the porch, bleeding and sobbing. They find Ashley's body in the bedroom, posed, covered, lifeless. And they find Carly, a few blocks away, crawling out of a storm drain, covered in dirt, shaking. An officer pulls over, asks if she's involved in the shooting. She says, "Yes, sir." They handcuff her, swab her hands for gunpowder residue, and as they're loading her into the patrol car, Carly asks a question, "Is my stepdad okay?" Not her mom, her stepdad, because Carly already knew her mom was dead. She was the one who killed her. Within hours, Gregg was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, the 911 call, the text messages, witness testimony. But Carly's defense team had one card left to play: insanity. They argued that Carly wasn't evil. She was sick, that the voices in her head, the medication change, the psychotic break, it all added up to a girl who didn't know what she was doing. But the prosecution, they saw something else entirely. They saw a calculated, manipulative killer. And the jury would have to decide, was Gregg insane? Or was she just evil? But before we get to the trial, let's talk about what happened after Carly was arrested. Because this is where things get even more disturbing. Carly was not granted bail. She would be held in an adult facility while awaiting trial. And because she was a minor being held in an adult facility, she had to be kept out of sight and sound of any adult inmates. That meant solitary confinement, 24 hours a day, for 6 months, no visitors except her attorneys, no interaction with other people, just 4 walls and her own thoughts. For a 14-year-old girl, especially one already struggling with mental health issues, this was torture. Her defense team argued that keeping her in solitary was cruel and unusual punishment, that it would make her mental state even worse, that she needed treatment, not isolation. But the judge's hands were tied. The law required it, and so Carly sat in that cell, alone, waiting for her trial to begin. Meanwhile, the prosecution was building their case, and they had a lot to work with. The security footage was damning. It showed Carly methodically retrieving the gun, checking her mother's location, and then calmly executing her plan. The text messages were even worse. "When will you be home, honey?" It showed premeditation. It showed manipulation. It showed that Carly knew exactly what she was doing. And then there was the physical evidence. Carly had hidden the kitchen security camera in the refrigerator. She knew the cameras were there. She knew they were recording. And she tried to cover her tracks. That's not the behavior of someone experiencing a psychotic break. That's the behavior of someone trying to get away with murder. But the defense had their own evidence. Carly's journal entries, her therapy records, her prescription history. They brought in a psychiatrist who diagnosed Carly with bipolar disorder and psychosis. He testified that in the week leading up to the murder, Carly was experiencing auditory hallucinations, voices telling her to do violent things. The medication switch, he said, triggered a full psychotic break. Carly didn't know right from wrong. She wasn't in control. He pointed to Carly's journal entry from March 12, 7 days before the murder, where she wrote about hearing voices, about feeling like she was losing control. He argued that Carly's biological father had a history of severe mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and that Ashley had always feared Carly would inherit those same struggles. The defense painted a picture of a girl who was drowning, who was crying out for help, who snapped under the weight of her own unraveling mind. It was compelling. It was heartbreaking, and for a moment, it seemed like it might actually work. But then the prosecution brought in their experts, 4 of them, and every single one of them said the same thing. Gregg was not insane. One psychiatrist called her behavior diabolical. Another said the text message to Heath, "When will you be home, honey?" proved she knew exactly what she was doing. That, he said, is not consistent with psychosis. That is deceitful. They pointed out that in the 9 therapy sessions Carly attended before the murder, she never once mentioned hallucinations. She never reported hearing voices. She never described any psychotic symptoms. Her therapist testified that Carly seemed completely normal, engaged, functional. Yes, she was anxious and depressed. But millions of teenagers are anxious and depressed. They don't murder their mothers. And then there was Carly's journal. Prosecutors read entries aloud. Dark, disturbing thoughts. Entries where Carly questioned morality, faith, and family. One line stood out: "It's okay to be evil." The courtroom went silent, but here's what the defense argued. Those journal entries proved Carly was struggling with her sense of reality. That she was questioning fundamental concepts like good and evil because her mind was fracturing. The prosecution countered. Those journal entries proved Carly was making a choice. She was giving herself permission to do whatever she wanted, to break free from the constraints of morality. It all came down to interpretation, and the jury would have to decide which version they believed. September 2024, 6 months after the murder, Carly Gregg's trial begins. She's 15 now, still a child, but she's being tried as an adult. If convicted, she faces life in prison. Before the trial even started, the prosecution offered Carly a plea deal: 40 years in prison. No possibility of parole. 40 years. For a 15-year-old girl, that's essentially a life sentence. But Carly rejected it. She chose to roll the dice, to put her fate in the hands of a jury. And when the trial began, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The courtroom was packed. Media from across the country descended on Brandon, Mississippi. Everyone wanted to see the girl who killed her mother. Carly sat at the defense table, small and fragile looking. She wore conservative clothing. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like exactly what she was, a child. But as the trial progressed, the jury saw something else. They saw the security footage of Carly walking calmly through the house, retrieving the gun, hiding it behind her back, checking to make sure her mom was still in the bedroom. They saw her sitting at the kitchen counter after the murder, texting, smiling, singing. They heard the 911 call, Heath's screams, his terror, his disbelief. They saw photos of Ashley's body, the posed hands, the red towel, the bullet wound to her face. And they heard testimony from Carly's friend, the friend who saw Ashley's body, the friend who heard Carly say, "I've got 3 more waiting for my stepdad." Carly sat at the defense table, crying, shaking. She covered her ears when they played the 911 call. She sobbed when they showed the surveillance footage. Her reaction seemed genuine, raw, heartbroken, but the jury had to separate emotion from evidence, and the evidence was overwhelming. Heath Smiley took the stand, and his testimony was devastating. He talked about the Carly he knew, the sweet, bubbly girl who wrote him Father's Day cards, the girl who called him Dad, the girl he loved as his own daughter. And then he talked about that day, coming home from work, walking through the door, calling out for his wife, and seeing Carly, standing there with the gun, screaming, her face twisted into something unrecognizable. It wasn't Carly, he said, his voice breaking. It was someone else. He described the moment she fired, the pain in his shoulder, the struggle to get the gun away from her. And then he described finding Ashley, the woman he loved, the mother of the girl who just shot him. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. But even Heath, the man Carly tried to kill, couldn't bring himself to call her evil. He said something was wrong with her that day. Something had broken inside her. And yet, even he couldn't say she was insane. The prosecution's closing argument was simple and devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a whodunit case. We know who killed Ashley Smiley. We know who shot Heath Smiley. The only question is, did Carly Gregg know what she was doing? And the evidence clearly shows that she did. They walked the jury through the timeline again. The way Carly checked her mother's location, the way she retrieved the gun, the way she texted Heath, pretending to be Ashley, the way she hid the security camera. These are not the actions of someone experiencing psychosis, the prosecutor said. These are the actions of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who planned, someone who executed, someone who tried to cover their tracks. The defense's closing argument was equally powerful. Yes, Carly Gregg pulled the trigger. We're not denying that, but the question isn't what she did. It's why, and the only explanation that makes sense is that Carly was not in her right mind. A girl who loved her mother, who had no history of violence, who by all accounts was a sweet, loving child. That girl doesn't suddenly decide to commit murder unless something is terribly, terribly wrong. They reminded the jury of the medication change, the journal entries about voices, the family history of mental illness, the testimony from their psychiatric expert. This was not evil, the defense attorney said. This was illness, and Carly Gregg deserves treatment, not punishment. After less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Guilty, on all counts. First-degree murder, attempted murder, tampering with evidence. Carly's face crumpled. She buried her head in her hands. Her attorneys tried to comfort her, but there was nothing they could say. And then came sentencing. The jury had 3 options: life with the possibility of parole, defer to the judge, or life without parole. They chose life without parole. Carly Gregg will spend the rest of her life in prison. She'll never see the outside world again. At 15 years old, her life is over. As Carly was led away in handcuffs, her defense attorney made a statement to the press. People are more than the worst thing they've ever done. Maybe that's true, but the jury didn't see it that way. Neither did the judge. Neither did the prosecution's 4 mental health experts. They all saw the same thing: a girl who knew right from wrong. Who made a choice? Who planned? Who executed? Carly's attorneys have filed an appeal. They're arguing that she didn't receive a fair trial, that the evidence of her mental illness wasn't given enough weight, that a 15-year-old shouldn't spend the rest of her life in prison. But as of now, that's exactly where she is, in an adult facility, back in solitary confinement, alone. And Heath Smiley, he's living with scars, physical and emotional, that will never fully heal. He lost his wife, the woman he loved, the mother of the girl he raised as his own. And that girl, she's the one who took her from him. In the months since the trial, public opinion has been divided. Some people believe Carly got exactly what she deserved, that she's a cold-blooded killer who manipulated everyone around her. Others believe she's a victim of a broken mental health system, that she should have been in treatment, not prison, that a 15-year-old brain isn't fully developed, isn't capable of truly understanding the permanence of death. The truth? It's probably somewhere in between. Carly Gregg was a troubled girl. She had voices in her head. She was on the wrong medication. She was spiraling. But does that explain what she did? 4 mental health experts said no. The jury said no. The judge said no. Carly Gregg killed her mother in cold blood. She tried to kill her stepdad. She showed no remorse in the moment. But in court, she cried. She shook. She looked broken. So here's the question I can't stop thinking about. Was Carly Gregg evil? Or was she sick? And does it even matter? Because either way, Ashley Smiley is dead. Heath Smiley is scarred forever. And a 15-year-old girl will spend the rest of her life behind bars. There are no winners here. Just tragedy. What this case really exposes is the massive gap in our mental health system. Carly was getting treatment. She was in therapy. She was on medication. And it still wasn't enough. How many other teenagers are walking around right now with voices in their heads? with dark thoughts they're too afraid to share, with medications that aren't working or are making things worse. And how many of them will snap before anyone realizes they need help? That's the real horror of this story. Not just what Carly did, but what it says about all the Carlys out there we're failing to help. The question isn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It's about prevention. It's about catching these warning signs before it's too late. Because the truth is, Carly Gregg gave plenty of warnings. The cutting, the journal entries, the voices, the medication struggles. Everyone saw the signs, and everyone tried to help. But it wasn't enough. So what do we do differently? How do we prevent the next Carly Gregg? I don't have the answers. I wish I did. What I do know is this: mental illness is real. Trauma is real. The effects of medication on developing brains are real. But so is responsibility. So is accountability. So is the fact that Ashley Smiley is dead and never coming back. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of this entire case. There's no neat answer, no clear villain, no obvious solution, just a 14-year-old girl who killed her mother, and a justice system that had to decide what to do with her. If this story shocked you, if it left you questioning everything you thought you knew about guilt and innocence, then I have another case I think you need to see. Check the video on your screen right now. I believe it was made for you.